Hi all, this is Skate, and I want to make a quick video on this new T26E5, the Tier 8 Premium American Heavy Tank. And it's in crates. Yay. Why crates for this? Why? I hate crates, but nonetheless, it's in crates. If you're going to have a bit of a gamble on them, then each to their own. I'm going to come straight out the bat and say, personally, I don't think it's worth it. Now, that being said, when you look at it statistically on paper, it's got a 90mm gun first off. For a 90mm, it has above average penetration, 221mm of penetration on its standard APCR. Look at something like a T26E4, the Super Pershing. That has 205, Chieftain T95 has 202, M26 Pershing even has 180. So the penetration's good on it. On top of that, accuracy's pretty good, 0.30. Yeah, it's above average in terms of gun handling. The other frustrating thing, in my opinion, it's a 90mm. Most other guns in Blitz with 90mm have 225 alpha. This thing has 240 alpha with its 90mm gun. That does frustrate me a little bit, because everything I've looked at Tier 8 with 90mm, granted I may have missed a few, but 225 alpha, yet this thing's coming in packing 240. Why? Obviously to sell it, but it's a bit frustrating that they've done that and just upped the alpha for this one. Actually, I tell a lie, the only one I can think of is the M41 90mm. That thing packs in 240 alpha per shot. Other than that though, everything else 90mm, 225 damage. The T26E5 Sheriff though, it's got above average damage per minute as a result. 2,515 for a Tier 8 heavy is very respectable, especially when you consider things like ISs come in packing around 2,000. Chieftain T95 comes in 2,300, and a T32 comes in 2,162. So gun-wise, gun's great. There's no issues with the gun. It also has that lovely 10 degrees of gun depression. So I'm a fan of gun depression, and with that in mind, you would think I absolutely adore this tank, because it ticks a lot of boxes for me. Yet, I just found it so vanilla to play. I didn't find it enthralling. I didn't want to go back into another match. If I'm honest with you, I ended up going, right, I'll play one more game just so I've got footage. And aside from that, I'm not going back into the press account to play it. I just didn't really overly enjoy it. It reminds me, obviously, of the M26 Pershing. It looks like it. It plays like it. It just feels like it's, I don't know, gobbled down a couple of steroids, and voila. Now, you've got a Super Pershing, which obviously should be a better Pershing. And I do think it's considerably better, and I would rather jump in my T26E4 Super Pershing than this all day long. Now, granted, this thing has 300 more damage per minute than a Super Pershing. It also has more penetration, and the gun is also more accurate. Yet, I would feel much more confident driving a Super Pershing. And on the off chance you are watching this video trying to decide whether or not to buy crates or not to get this tank, don't bother. Just go pick up the Super Pershing from the tech tree if you don't already have it. It's got better hull armor. The turrets, it's arguable. This thing has a very, very good turret. There's no disputing the fact that this has a very good turret. But that said, the same for the Super Pershing. The Super Pershing has that spaced armor all over the turret. It's weak on top. This thing is weak on the cheeks if you're not pointing directly at someone. So it's arguable which one's got the better turrets. But for me, again, it would be Super Pershing. But focusing on this tank, the turret's great, but you have to be pointing at something. The gun mantlet is very thick. Anything shooting at the front is going to bounce off. But if one of these things is not pointing its gun directly at you, go for the cheek. It's rounded. You should be able to penetrate it directly in the side. Or, if it's not hull down, just go for the hull. You'll penetrate it quite reliably in the hull all day long. Yes, the upper plate is good. I'm not going to say exceptional. The upper plate on this thing is good, but it's not invulnerable. If this thing is using its full gun depression, then the upper plate becomes a bit tougher, but it's still not invulnerable. And then you've got the lower plate, which obviously is just going to be smash and grab lots of damage. Also, getting shot through the front on this thing does knock your driver out quite often, so make sure you're cautious in which repair kit you use. I have a horrible habit of using my multi-repair kit to fix a track very stupidly if I'm in a rush, rather than my repair kit. So if you're in one of these things, that's a conscious thing you need to watch out for. If you're dealing with one of these things, and you can go through the upper plate, pick the upper plate, because it can and will regularly knock out the driver. And the other thing we haven't touched on yet is the side armor. In good old American, side armor is weak. It has 76mm on the side of this, just like it has on the side of the T32, and just like it has on the side of the Super Persian. What that basically means is track wheels are a really easy, vulnerable spot. The hull is not well angled, it's nice and flat on the sides, which means punch holes in it all day long. But this is the case for a lot of Americans at this sort of tier. They're easy to hit through the track wheel, and they're easy to cause lots of damage through the track wheel as well. But again, that's the case for a lot of American tanks around these tiers. They're very vulnerable on the sides, and shockingly vulnerable on the rear. T49s love that big juicy back-end engine deck on these things. As we mentioned though, this is the case for a lot of Americans of this tier. I mean, T34, the American heavy tank. The tier 8 premium, obviously. I love that thing. I've played several hundred battles in it, and I think it's a brilliant tank, and I would pick that tank over this all day long as well. That's just as vulnerable on the sides of the hull. It's nowhere near as mobile as this thing. It doesn't have the same DPM as this thing, but for that ultra reliable penetration and that nice gun, I'd pick the T34 over this all day long. And the other thing is you can buy a T34. You're not buying this tank, you're buying a chance at this tank. So as I've already mentioned in the video, there's nothing wrong with this tank. It's certainly not overpowered. If you were worried about that, I don't think in any shape or form this thing is overpowered. In fact, you could just call it an up-tiered, up-armored T26E5 if you want to. It kind of looks like it as well. But it's definitely not overpowered. It's a good tank, but it just feels vanilla. It doesn't feel exciting. You may even be able to tell from the tone of my voice. There's nothing that makes me go, ooh, let's go play this tank again. It's just alright. I'd say the only sweet spot this thing has is that extra alpha per 90mm shot. That's it. And the only place you're going to use that effectively is when you hull down like this. When you're in a situation where you can bounce from your turret. If you're not in that circumstance, you're not really a heavy. You're more of a medium. You're a heavium, obviously. But for a heavium, I think the Super Persian does outshine this because it's more reliable when you're not hull down. And then you've got other things to consider. For example, well, actually, let's just comment one thing on collecting tanks. Because of the value and the chance of getting tanks nowadays on Blitz, gone are the days, in my opinion, of collecting tanks. Just buying a tank because you want the tank. I'd say for a lot of people that is the case. It is the case for me as well. I don't buy every tank like I used to because I want every tank. I don't anymore. So if you're a collector, it doesn't matter what anyone says in the video, if you're looking for recommendations, you're going to buy it anyway. But I honestly think gone are the days for a lot of people trying to collect every tank in the game. It just doesn't happen anymore. And with that in mind, you end up in the scenario of, do I need this tank? And for a lot of people, it will be a no. Because they may already have a T34 or a Super Persian even, and therefore think, there's no point. And that's exactly the point for me on this, is I think there's much better tanks in terms of tier 8 premiums you could go and collect with a very similar playstyle. So from me, Mr. Vanilla here, this T26E5 Sheriff is a thumbs down, I'm afraid. Not because it's a bad tank, just because it's a blend tank. I suppose we should look at the bright side. It's not overpowered and broken. It's not power creeping the hell out of everything. And that's not the reason I give it a thumbs down, by the way. I just don't feel it adds anything exciting, which I haven't already got available to me quite easily in multiple different forms, and in better forms in my garage already. But yeah, that's it for this video. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you in the next one then. Bye-bye.